Hey everyone, life has become beautifully full, and I've been thinking about how best to keep Gyno Curious alive and thriving each week. One idea I'm embracing is revisiting some of our most meaningful past episodes, those conversations that still resonate, challenge, and inspire. What I love most about this podcast is the wide range of voices we've welcomed. Some episodes explore deeply conventional aspects of medicine, while others lean into what some might call the quirky or unconventional. Through it all, I've invited you to stretch your minds and hearts to stay curious about health and healing, to see both sides of the speculum, so to speak. Some of our guests have been healers, others women who've navigated illness and hardship with strategy and strength. Today's episode is a return to one of our earliest conversations, recorded over a year and a half ago with Rachel Fisch-Kaplan. Rachel shares her deeply personal journey with infertility, a condition that affects between 8 and 12% of reproductive age couples worldwide. It is one of the most common and often most emotionally challenging health issues for people between the ages of 20 and 45 years of age. Rachel's story is told with such honesty, integrity, and grace. Whether this is your first time hearing it or you're tuning in again, I encourage you to listen with openness. Sometimes hearing a familiar story at a new moment in our lives brings a different kind of resonance. As always, thank you so much for listening to Gyno Curious. Be well, and remember, your instincts and intuitions are powerful, powerful teachers. Trust them. They are not to be ignored. Welcome, Gyno Curious listeners. I am Dr. Amy Novatt. We are here to investigate what it means to be a healer and to be healed. Today, I'm going to be speaking with Rachel Fisch-Kaplan, a speech pathologist who specializes in kids, about her journey with infertility. Hi, Rachel. Thank you so much for joining me on Gyno Curious.
Hi, Amy. Thanks for having me.
So let me just start with the definition of infertility in the medical environment is a condition characterized by the failure to establish a clinical pregnancy after 12 months of regular and unprotected sexual intercourse. However, for women aged 35 and older, the inability to conceive after 6 months is generally considered infertility. Secondary infertility is a woman who might have been pregnant, had babies, and then is having trouble having subsequent children. Infertility affects between 8 and 12% of reproductive age couples worldwide. This makes it one of the most common diseases for people between the ages of 20 and 45. In addition, the longer a woman tries to get pregnant without conceiving, the lower are her chances to get pregnant without medical treatment. Most couples, up to 85% with normal fertility, will conceive within a year of trying. The ancient Greeks were the first to medicalize infertility, setting it apart from superstition and folklore. And it was only in 1677 when Antoine Leeuwenhoek first discovered spermatozoa through a microscope and their importance in the formation of embryos. Despite the continued interest in sperm, however, only a few loose-knit societies and fringe researchers really were investigating infertility. And only in about the 1970s did it become a true medical issue. And the real breakthrough came in the summer of 1978 when British physicians Edwards and Steptoe achieved the first successful birth from IVF. In addition to the celebration of the science and accompanying the accomplishment of IVF, there was also an uproar and scandal. Many religious leaders forbade IVF because they thought a baby made in a laboratory dish was not natural and was a work of the devil and the testing the will of God. Over time, assisted reproductive technology, IVF, and genetic testing of embryos has allowed for more pregnancies with healthier babies, and the science continues to evolve despite the scandal. Rachel, would you please share with us a bit about your infertility journey?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I was about 30 years old when I decided with my husband that we wanted to try to have children, but I always knew it might be difficult for me to get pregnant because I have something called polycystic ovarian syndrome. And basically the way it played out for me is that I didn't ovulate regularly on my own. So throughout my adolescence, if I didn't get my period every 9 to 12 months, the doctor would give me a pill to bring it on. So when we were trying to get pregnant, we tried for a number of months, but to no surprise, I did not get pregnant. And that's when we started to talk to my doctor about what we should try. And we tried a drug called Clomid, which sometimes helps women like me ovulate, but also sometimes it may get you to ovulate, but it also thickens some of the mucus around the egg. And so sometimes it actually makes it harder for the egg and the sperm to meet. So that was not overly successful for me personally.
Yeah, it's the journey is challenging on a lot of levels. One of which are the medications that are given. At what point did you decide then to pursue IVF, or was that something you decided? Was it something that your doctor said you've just got to do this?
Well, we were with a doctor who was affiliated with Cornell Medical Center in their IVF center, but I wasn't seeing her through that. I was actually seeing her as an endocrinologist and a gynecologist, but the offices were separate. So she had me on Clomid for about 9 months. And I did get pregnant once, but then that pregnancy didn't last. And her recommendation at that time was to stay the course on Clomid. And my husband and I decided that we were ready for IVF, that the research that we were doing said that if it was going to work, most likely it would have, and that we might need some more help getting pregnant. And that's when we decided to do an IVF cycle.
Can you tell our listeners what that entails? What does going through IVF entail?
Sure. It's kind of intense. Initially you think, oh my goodness, I can't do what they want me to do. You start to take certain drugs, and at least in my case, they were trying to get me to ovulate. So it was like being on massive dosages of hormones. So you're very moody and anxious. You're already anxious because you want to get pregnant and you haven't been able to, but it's like injecting PMS into your system. But then they monitor you very closely. So you're going to the doctor's office every morning, usually sometime between 6 and 8 o'clock in the morning, for them to test your blood to see where you are in the process. So you're constantly being monitored to see when your levels are correct for them to decide to go in and take the eggs out. But so you're having physical exams, you're having blood tests on a regular basis, you're taking injections. It's kind of like all consuming.
Yeah, it's a very challenging experience. Again, both physically, psychologically, spiritually. So how did you weather this kind of roller coaster ride? What did you do to help you move through it?
Well, it's interesting. I think the first time I was going through it, and, there's those huge fears of, is this even going to work? How can we afford to do it? You're also, hormonal. I found it really challenging. One of the things that happened, I was kind of doing all the testing during the summer months, but because I was getting my blood tested so often, I was bruised from my wrist to my shoulder, but it was the middle of the summer. So not just that the bruising from the testing was uncomfortable, but also was embarrassing. Like I felt like I needed to wear long sleeves during the summer. So that was like an unexpected additional stressor that really didn't have to do with what was going on with the fertility. I was really a wreck. I was moody. I didn't want to go to other people's kids' birthday parties. And I also felt like I didn't want to talk to anybody about it. I didn't want anybody to know. I was ashamed. I felt like I was a failure as a woman. I felt angry, scared. Like I feel like every negative emotion that's out there was coursing through my body. And fear and embarrassment, I think, mostly.
Yeah, throughout time, the value of women prior to marriage was their pureness and virginity. And then after marriage, their capacity to bear children. So in early times, divorce, polygamy were options for a man if his wife couldn't bear children. It was always deemed a failure of the woman and not the man. And I hate to say it, but I think that way of thinking hasn't really left our society, even though we know that 1/3 of infertility in couples is due to the male factor. So if we might, can we talk a little bit about your husband and how he reacted to this journey? Because clearly it affected not just you, but the dynamics in the home.
Sure. As far as our infertility, it really was me and the fact that I wasn't ovulating. The male factor on his end was fine, but it was interesting because I think it was me who really wanted to have children. I think we both wanted to have children, but if we didn't, he was like, I'll be fine. I don't need that. And it was me that really felt like I needed it. But I think through this journey and through the struggle to get pregnant, by the time we finally had our first child, he was 100% in at that point as well. Like, obviously, he had to have been involved up till that point, but I think emotionally as well, just we were so grateful and felt so blessed. It wasn't just like we had a cheap bottle of wine one night and all of a sudden we were pregnant. We worked for 3 years. And while I think if I had said, I want to give up on this, I don't want to do this, I think he would have still been okay. But I think for me, I would always feel like I was missing something. So I don't know if that answers that question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. I'd be curious, do you think he would have ever used the word or descriptive shame around the journey for him? That he was feeling shame that you guys weren't having a baby?
No.
Yeah, it's so fascinating how us women have embraced that capacity far too much. And I'd like to suggest that one of the things that we take home from this conversation for all folks who are trying to have babies, that shame should not be a part of this, and that our bodies are beautifully flawed, and that there are challenges that each and every one of us address and have to cope with at one point in our lives, whether it's infertility or cancer or diabetes, etc. And that particularly around childbearing, there's so much of a stigma around not having children. Again, even in today's, if you will, modern life, that when a person decides not to have children, not to have a family, there is still some question of like, really? Is that because you can't or you don't want to? And that's a shame. It's really a shame. And the shame lies in the judgment, not in our decision making. It sounds like you and your partner, and pardon me, I don't know his name, weathered the storm, if you will, and that your relationship stayed intact. Were there times where you needed help with it? Were there times where you felt like maybe this is going to cause a breakup?
I think it was incredibly stressful. He was also trying to launch a career in the theater, so he was traveling a lot. It just felt like the stakes were really high. And we both actually went into counseling, and we didn't do it together. We didn't do couples therapy. We did individual therapy. And you might think, oh, well, you really needed to work on yourselves as a couple because you were frustrated as a couple. But the truth is that we each had our own kind of demons that we needed to deal with. Him coming to terms with like where he fit in, where his career was going, what he wanted, what was the most important. And it was totally separate from me. It wasn't about me. And my struggles and journey with getting pregnant, although that's what first got me to walk into the psychologist's office, very quickly helped me realize that there were things that I needed to learn about myself so I could just deal with life in a better way. So yes, infertility was this horrible thing that I was dealing with, but it was my response to it, and my response when I feel like I'm either out of control or that I'm vulnerable, and what I can do. Because I think up until that point, I always felt like, I don't know, maybe someone else would pull me out of it or wait for somebody else to fix it. And learning what I can do to empower myself, to soothe myself in a situation where I'm feeling vulnerable, or how to mitigate or limit the amount of vulnerability that I'm setting myself up for. So For example, the psychologist pointed out that I'm a gatherer, that the way I calm myself is by gathering information all over the place. So if I go to a doctor and they shut me down and don't want to hear my questions or don't give me time to ask the questions, that's going to trigger me into that downward spiral of really feeling useless and helpless. So now I interview doctors when I have my clothes on and I'm not in a vulnerable position to see what is your turnaround time when I email or call? What can I expect? And also let them know what my expectations are, which may sound insane. Like I never even realized that was an option to do. But if you meet a doctor and they're like, yeah, I won't meet with you, then I already know you're not the doctor for me.
Great.
That's just one of the examples.
Thank you for sharing that with us. You brought up so many important issues. The first that I want to comment on is how often illness, and we'll call infertility an illness just for a lack of a better word for a moment, how often illness brings out our whole landscape, our emotional landscape, our familial landscape, kind of every aspect of our life. And so often people isolate their illness in the doctor's office only and divorce themselves or dissociate, if you will, from the illness in their everyday life. And of course, for me, I see healing as a process by which you integrate illness into your daily life, understand the illness and what might be causing it, and then, of course, coming up with resources to help address the challenges. And those resources are often psychological help, complementary approaches like acupuncture, homeopathy, eating better, exercise, just ways of living with or without the illness in order to be the best that we can be in our day-to-day. So thank you for pointing that out because it's so important. And of course, the work you did with a psychologist didn't make you pregnant, but I'm certain, there's no science to support me here, but I fully believe that helped your, if you will, physical and emotional canvas be more receptive to the work you were doing with your doctors. The other thing,
Absolutely.
the other thing I absolutely want to point out is, and this podcast may make it very clear to my listeners that I am concerned about the state of medicine today and the challenges with finding the right doctor, going through treatments, finding humanity in the process. And I'd like you to speak a little bit more about that because infertility, like so many illnesses, is such a personal journey. And what you might have gone through is different from what somebody else might have gone through with the same diagnosis, PCOS and infertility. So I'd ask, besides the therapist, what you did to support yourself through that work, not just finding the right doctor, but were there other things that you did?
So some of the things, I'm trying to think of what else we did. I don't know if this is relevant, but after I went from the first doctor with Clomid, I did do an IVF cycle with a place in New York City. And that's the place where I was like bruised from my shoulder to my wrist. And I did get pregnant there. It wasn't a great retrieval, but they put them in anyway. And I don't think we ever even heard a heartbeat that showed that I was pregnant. I think it may have been more of like a hormonal pregnancy as opposed to like a viable life. But when I had tried to talk to the doctor about what had happened, I felt very shut down. And I decided after that I wasn't going to go on. I had decided that to protect myself, I felt too much like a guinea pig, just out of control, emotional all the time. And we started to look into things like adoption and other plans of how to get pregnant. But I needed a break. And I was at a party and a friend of ours was there and he had said something like, "Oh, when are you going to have kids?" And I thought I was fine with it, but I burst into tears right in front of him. And he was like, "Oh, wait a second. What did I just say?" And I want to have a kid. I can't. And I tried and it doesn't work. And he said, "My best friend is a fertility doctor and he's in New Jersey. He's at Hackensack Medical Center. It's not necessarily one of the big names that you hear, like if you Google the top places." He said, "But his numbers are just as good and he's known for his bedside manner. Can I put you in touch with him?" And putting me in touch with Dr. McGovern, like I had his direct telephone number. He treated me like a human being. He really seemed to care about me. And so you might say like, oh, maybe that's just your imagination or where you were. But for example, at his office, instead of using a regular sized needle to test my blood all the time, he used what's called a butterfly needle, which is what they use on children or people with smaller veins. And I didn't bruise at all that whole cycle. I didn't bruise. And so to me, something as small as asking, letting him know that happened, he's like, oh, I do this for all of my patients because it's an easier way. It takes one of those stressors out that didn't need to be there. That's the part that kind of blows your mind. You're like, you had that capability the whole time and you like chose to let me be bruised from my shoulder to my wrist. It's, so I think for me, it's like finding the doctor that you feel respects you, listens to you, cares about you, empathizes with you, but also has great, insight, because even if it doesn't work the first time, each time they do something in a cycle, they're learning about your body or what it will take to get you pregnant. And I think that just mostly what I did was start to ask questions, ask for what I needed, and just felt justified in asking for that.
Thank you. Thank you. One of the questions that I always have internally when I'm speaking to someone going through infertility is, when is it enough? And I have to bring up the cost because as of June of 2022, 20 states have passed fertility insurance coverage laws. 14 of those laws include IVF coverage. So for so many folks, the cost of this kind of care is prohibited. The average cost of a single IVF cycle in the U.S. is between $10,000 and $15,000. And some statistics I saw, the entire process with medications, et cetera, can cost up to $30,000 each cycle. This clearly is a intervention for a small subgroup of folks who either have great insurance or the means to pay for it. And I feel that's rather tragic in this country, that this is not something that is provided to folks, for all folks. We're coming to a close, and I guess the most important thing for us to share with our audience is tell us a little bit about your family. Who do you have in your home behind your sofa that I'm looking at on Zoom?
I have 3 beautiful children. Our eldest, Sid, was born in 2003, and the product of an IVF cycle. They put 3 embryos in, 1 took, and we were thrilled. And then 2 years later, we put 3 other embryos in, 2 of them stuck. So we got twins. And so my eldest, Sid, is at Mount Holyoke College doing wonderfully. And my twins, Alexa and Sienna, are seniors in high school. And it's wonderful. And it's, the first cycle, I just want to say, I didn't tell anybody what I was going through. The second time, once I already had Sid and I was pregnant with the twins, I think strangers on the street, I was walking up, I'm like, I'm going to tell everybody what's going on. And the doctors really were amazing to make that happen. But it was a scary journey, but well worth it.
Wonderful. Yeah, when you have that level of joy, even just telling the soda machine about the news is great. I can't thank you enough, and I'm so happy for you and your family. And despite the very challenging hardship of infertility, I'm so glad you've been blessed with 3 beautiful daughters. And again, thank you for sharing such an intimate story with us today.
Thank you very much, Amy.
Thank you also to my listeners for joining me as we venture into the limitless conversations about our bodies and the world of OBGYN. I would love to hear from you. Please email your questions and comments to comments@radiofreerhinecliff.org or call us at 845-307-7446. Also, thank you to my producers, Jen Hammoud and Matty Rosenberg. Until our next conversation, stay healthy and stand strong in your knowledge and your insights.